Okay, so that was kind of a brief run through some coastal circulations. Now let's move to marine pollution. Okay, so let's just look at the definition and then look at the issues. World Health Organization actually defines marine pollution as introduction by man, directly or indirectly, of substances or energy into the marine environment, including estuaries, which result or is likely to result in such deleterious effect as to harm living resources and marine life, hazards to human health, hindrance to marine activities, including shipping and so on, or swimming at the beach, uh, fish like legitimate use of the seas, impairment of quality of for the use of seawater, and reduction of amenities. So this is important because you have to find a way to define it officially and then make regulations to reduce and prevent reduce pollution and prevent people from polluting and punish the polluters, right? So you need official definitions. How are they done? Basically, environmental bioassay is where you have, it's kind of a widely used technique. You might have heard about it in the context of human bioassays for diagnosing diseases, for example, like COVID, right? So this is a widely used technique to see how a particular pollutant may affect marine organisms. This is not easy because you need some kind of a measure where the concentration keeps increasing, and you say at this concentration the mortality of a particular species is 50%, hence concentrations cannot be allowed to exceed this particular threshold. Well, problem is it's very species specific, and you need to do the experiments to establish those concentration levels, and it does not account for pollutants which can stay in the water and then have effects in the long term. Or we'll see later on, there are things like DDT, which we will define later, that actually don't kill an organism or a bird, but it changes its reproductive abilities, fertility rates, and so on. So killing is not the only measure of pollution, right? So they can also combine with other substances to produce a pollutant that you didn't include in the bioassay. And of course, these are very time consuming and organism specific, and they are expensive. Okay, so human activity that is affecting the coastal oceans the most has been the direct waste disposal. In the 60s and before, as the population began to grow and people started to move in closer to the coast and amount of pollution, wastewater, etc. began to increase, people thought the ocean is so vast that you could just put everything into the ocean. Just go to the coast and dump it right there. And the old saying was that dilution is the solution to the pollution. Sounds nice, and people really believed it. We still use it in some ways, as we will see, but the famous book called The Silent Spring by Rachel Carson showed that actually it's not that simple. Environmental damage was being done by disposing of things improperly, right? So diluting pollutants is not really that simple. Plastic is another thing that actually doesn't disintegrate at all, that we will see can create long-term effects that actually are not even known yet, right? So debate about dumping in the waste is as old as human civilization, probably, even though only recently we started to become more aware and start to regulate it. Some people would say we should not dump anything in the ocean. People even worry about the birthday balloons, helium balloons that we release that end up floating away, exploding and falling into the ocean and killing fish, for example. and some say it's okay as long as you monitor it and you dispose it properly and make sure that it's not accumulating, it is in fact being diluted and so on. So there are some natural types of pollutants like petroleum seeps naturally, methane and so on. There are many things that are seeping at the bottom of the ocean, at the coast, or in the deep ocean. But human beings add to this petroleum pollution, obviously. And the pictures that always shock us is when a ship runs into the coast somewhere and spills a lot of oil. But we will see that everyday traffic actually contributes much more than the containers leaking when they crash. Okay, dichloro, diphenyl, trichloroethane (DDT) was a pesticide and an insecticide that was used. It turned out to be a carcinogen, and it turned out to affect some birds, as we will see later on. Polycyclic polycarbonated biphenyls. I think PCBs were used in electric wiring and as a chemical for various other production systems. Mercury is being produced. It used to be photographic waste. Now we have all gone digital, but burning coal produces a lot of mercury, mining produces a lot of mercury, and there are many other activities, including cremation of human bodies can produce mercury and so on. The big problem is not so much the point source pollution. If it is a point source, you know where it is, maybe you can go and capture it or do something. This is also true for carbon dioxide. When the cars are running around everywhere, they are releasing CO2 everywhere. Hard to capture, but if it's a power plant, then at the power plant it's easier to capture the CO2 that's being released, right? So the non-point source pollutions, distributed sources, are a big problem. And trash. People drive around and throw trash. They go to the beach and they throw trash and so on. So we'll see that trash is a big problem. So oil spills often occur during transport accidents, but also from extraction. So the offshore deepwater drill, the Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico blew up in 2010 when there was a sudden release of gas that bubbled up and exploded the rig and couldn't be contained for 3 months, and it kept releasing millions of gallons of oil into the water. It was a very complicated process because Gulf of Mexico is so warm, and the oil usually should float on top of the water, but the low salinity warm water may have been lighter than the oil, so some of the oil stayed below the surface and was not, in fact half of it is still not accounted for, and so on. And loading and unloading is always an issue for leaking of petroleum into the ocean. But we will see more about it, and we will see that the natural seeps are actually serious contributors as well, but the rate at which they are released is so small that it is consumed by bacteria. Why? Remember that petroleum is a hydrocarbon. It is carbohydrates and sugars produced by photosynthesis in the past that has been buried, and it's food. So there are microbes which actually eat it. That's the good news, because artificially produced oil-eating bacteria were released into the Gulf of Mexico to clean up some of the Deepwater Horizon spill of crude oil.